Okay, so today I would like to share about my twin flame journey, just so we could have some fun here. So, welcome to Universal Love Channel. In the beginning of my spiritual awakening journey, I came across the term twin flame, and right away it caught my attention, wondering what that was about. But then, there's so many different versions of what exactly the twin flame is. It's really hard to know for sure. Some say it's just the balancing of the divine feminine and the divine masculine inside of one person. Others that it's one soul split into two people who meet one time and feel the connection, but then cannot be together, which triggers the awakening of one, the chaser, and then the runner. Anyway, if you are here, I'm sure you've heard all that. Then there's Matthias, who says, no, don't get fooled. The twin flame has nothing to do with a love story. So what then? I honestly had to give up on trying to figure this all out. But somehow, entangled into my awakening, I do have a story that so strangely makes me think this has to be a twin flame story. Stick around because it is pretty juicy. You'll like it. So let's start from the beginning. 20 years ago, in 2005. Twin flame was only 17 and I was 24. I was on my first and only trip to Peru until I just came back now after my awakening. I was traveling with my mom when we came to visit the city of Arequipa, Twin Flame's hometown. So he told me that since he was 13 years old, he only had one thing in mind, and it was looking for his girl. And somehow he knew she had to be Japanese. He says that when he saw me from the other side of the street, walking with my Japanese mom, he recognized me. Strange, right? And he knew right away that I was the one. By the way, my twin flame doesn't know or care about any twin flame stories to this day. It's all my fantasy. But check it out. So he came to talk to us. He ended up showing us around downtown, and we invited him to eat pizza with us. And then he asked me if we could meet again the next day, and that he would take me to a viewpoint and so forth. So out of unconditional friendship, I accepted to go. For me, it wasn't a date. I mean, he was a young kid. But for him, it totally was. So we did go out the next day. And the day after that, me and my mom, we were going on a tour to the Colca Canyon overnight. So when we came back from the tour, we saw each other again. And we went to develop a roll of pictures we had taken together. We made doubles and kept a set of pictures each. The next day, my mom and I were going to the airport to continue our trip to Cusco and go to the Machu Picchu. So little twin flame actually came with us all the way to the airport as well. So apparently I told him I would come back to see him at the end of my trip, over 4 months later. Because after I did the whole loop in South America, went to Bolivia, Chile, Argentina, then up Brazil and across the Amazon, I was coming back to Lima, Peru for my flight back to Canada. But then when I came back to Lima, I decided to go somewhere else and did not go back to Arequipa to meet with little twin flame again. Little did I know that this was the beginning of a whole life's drama for him. He apparently became so obsessed with me, he could not think of anything else. And he actually held on to the hope that I was coming back for him for years. But then I never did. So he went through all sorts of inner turmoils, burnt the pictures, then regretted it. But all these years, actually, we kept in touch. He would call my mom's home phone, or later call me on Skype, or we were sending emails every now and then. So he always knew what was going on in my life, boyfriends and all. Anyway, let's not make that too long and skip the details, but because I considered him like my poor little brother in Peru, I always made sure I answered his messages. Now, fast forward to 2022, just after my awakening. I had just spent 5 months with my family in Canada, and that was the whole awakening journey. From intensive 2 months and a half of shadow work, then boom, the Kundalini awakening, then me finding out that I had illuminated, and then cherry on the sundae, the aliens and the channel messages. So by then, my family all thought I went crazy. They were ready to lock me into mental health hospital, put me on medication, all that. So I was like, okay, time to go. I needed to get out of there. But I had no idea where to go. And this is exactly when grown-up Twin Flame sends me a message on Skype. First I thought, oh no, I don't have time for him. But then I answered right away because really I wasn't doing anything. And we started talking and ended up on the phone. And we were having a great conversation, laughing and all that. So I ended up telling him that I had just illuminated. And so he said, it was about time. I was like, what? What do you mean? He says, I awakened 10 years ago, in December 2012. I was like, what? And he went on to say that he thought I was the one who awakened him. I was like, what do you mean? He says, yeah, because you taught me unconditional love. He says, I had to accept that you never came back and that all I really wanted was for you to be happy, even though we couldn't be together. So, back then, I didn't know anything about twin flames yet. I only had heard the word, and I can't say it resonated, but it definitely scratched my ear. But then he was the very first person I knew who actually knew what I was talking about, mentioning illumination. So this is why I decided to come to Peru, so I could have someone to talk about awakenings with. And I actually thought he could be my teacher. So, can you see how this already fits the twin flame scenario? Where the two meet a first time, but then they don't stay together. The runner runs and the chaser suffers from it so much that it makes him work on all sorts of inner turmoil until he realizes that he needs to be happy on his own and not depend on another. And this triggers the awakening of the chaser. Then, the runner eventually awakens, and synchronicities makes them reunite, right? So I went to Peru and started living with Twin Flame. He only wanted to talk about awakenings for the first 2 weeks because he didn't agree with the alien stories and that they were here to help. And he also was actually pretty indifferent to the whole subject of the Great Awakening of humanity. But I think that's because he awakened 10 years ago and never found anyone to talk about it with. So he kind of blocked it. Anyway, we still moved in together in a small village called Pisac, which is actually hippie and spirituality / ayahuasca town of Peru. This is where I parked for a whole 15 months of dark night of the soul / void. So me and my twin flame were together, but pretty much each in our own bubble. we ended up being completely different on every aspect. Tastes, interests, personality, absolutely nothing in common. But by then, I thoroughly studied the theme of twin flames, and I was pretty convinced that this was a twin flame reunion. So the other thing they say about twin flames is that they're not necessarily meant to be together or stay together, but that the purpose is to trigger each other to help accelerating the ascension process or something. And looking back at the whole year and a half now we've spent together, I could totally see how this is actually the case. Check it out. So first of all, after analyzing deeply on my twin flame, I came to understand that his awakening was only partial, because he did have some characteristics of an awakened person in his behaviors, but he actually did not cure from his childhood wounds, and did have the unconscious behaviors of the rejection wound. And I could see through that. During my shadow work intensive course, which was all divinely orchestrated on me, I got to study a book called The 5 Wounds of the Soul That Doesn't Let You Be Yourself. That's from the author Lise Bourbeau of the Listen to Your Body movement. Anyway, I'll have to make a video about that book because it was so useful. She gives you all the unconscious behaviors and the body traits that goes with each typical 5 childhood wounds or wounds of the soul. So with her technique, you can identify someone's main triggered wound just by looking at their body and also recognize their unconscious behaviors accordingly. So without getting into too much details here, I could see through my twin flame's behaviors of the rejection wound, which totally makes sense from his childhood and further rejected by me. But the important thing for this video is that this allowed me to practice unconditional love. Being non-judging, tolerant, compassionate, empathetic, let live, no expectation, understand that we're all on the path at our own pace, accept him the way he is and where he's at, and respect that he has his own opinions, even though they're all the opposite of mine. And also, not letting myself get triggered by his behaviors. So, let go, breathe, understand that it didn't have anything to do with me and it all belonged to him, and not letting myself be affected by it. So all that I got to practice thanks to his presence, even though he was acting like a runaway weirdo. And that was a lot. So skipping some details here again, let's bring it to now. Now that we just had to separate again, right on summer solstice, a few weeks ago. The situation was getting worse and worse, and I came to the point where I had to put myself first and prioritize me and my well-being. Because as much as I didn't want to let his behavior affect me, in the end, it did. I was always able to come back to center every time I got kind of pulled down, but that would eventually not allow me to move forward, if you see what I mean. What his unconscious behaviors did is that he was doing everything to confirm his eternal rejection. So he would do everything he could in order to get a reject from me and confirm to himself that he is the eternal rejected. That's what the subconscious does. Some kind of self-sabotage. So I was insisting on not letting him win that reject. But then I had to let go and let him win. Oh, so in the meantime, we moved back to Arequipa. So he just went back to his house where he always lived. Since then, I went through and had to process a bunch of emotions. So, more practice. Feeling bad for him, but let that go. Feeling responsible for him, but let that go. A bit of sadness, a bit of disappointment, but at the same time, I automatically felt such a relief for myself. Finally able to focus on me and not having to worry about anyone else's needs or moods. Furthermore, I came to realize that this separation is actually the best thing for both of us, not only for me. Because now, this time alone again, I can only hope, will trigger him to look inwards and ask himself, what the heck is wrong with him, right? After waiting for me for 18 years, he finally gets his opportunity, and then he's gonna act like crap? So this period of reflection he's going to be thrown into is gonna have to trigger the next stage of his awakening. Understanding his unconscious/subconscious behaviors. And hopefully he will crack open that heart chakra and cure from his childhood wounds. So this is where I realized that we twin flames really activate the triggers to accelerate ascension. He has given me so much practice and triggered me to apply everything I've learned since my awakening. And I just triggered another round of reflection for him, where he's going to have to figure out why he has failed at applying the unconditional love he thought he understood. Unconscious, subconscious. Anyway, I hope this was entertaining. Twin flame story to be continued. Also, my twin flame, he told me that ever since he met me, for years, he kept seeing the number 24 everywhere. And that would remind him of me because I was 24 when we met. But now I'm thinking, this might also be number 24 because we're in the year 2024. And that 24 actually meant that that was the year where he was going to complete his awakening. I can only hope that's what it is. Please subscribe to the channel. Much love and a great journey to you all.